Over the last few sermons we've had, they've been designed to help us look at the world from a perspective that is based upon biblical ideas. And as Christians, we must use the Scriptures not only as guides for our lives, but also as a guide to how we should view the world. You see, as we finish up on our examination of how we should apply biblical worldview to the things going on in the world today, I want us to begin by expanding the idea of how people are similar today as they were years ago. I want to review a little history here for a moment. As you recall, in 1 Samuel chapter 8, the people originally approached Samuel with the request that they would be given a king like the rest of the people around them. And when Samuel spoke to the Lord about this, God told Samuel that the people had not rejected Samuel, but had rejected God because he had been their king. And then he told Samuel to warn them about what it would be like if they lived under a king. And they responded to Samuel's warnings with these words, "No, but there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles." You see, the desire to be like others often dictates how people act. We see it here in the Israelites, and we see it in people's lives and our lives today. Even when there are dire warnings, there are many who just want to go with the crowd. This mentality often may lead to harm because emotions take over rather than rational thought. If you watch the actions of the mob, you'll see what I mean. People who have no predetermined plan to get involved in physical activity, physical actions against someone, allow their emotion of the mob, and they will often follow the crowd rather than walk away. Emotions often run high, and actions begin being controlled more by the excitement or the rage or the emotion of the moment. When that happens, people lose all sense of reality and ignore the consequences that our actions might bring about. I read an article this morning about a very wealthy young lady in New York that did over 100. She was involved in a mob, in a riot there in New York just lately. $100,000 in damages. And she was involved in it. A very wealthy young lady. And she's facing criminal time and felony charges for what she did. I doubt that I don't know, it didn't say, but I wonder if she went out with that idea to loot. Why would you loot when you're wealthy as she was and do things? Or did she just get caught up in the emotion? I think that sometimes happens. And I think that people let their emotions get out of hand. But yet when they do that, that does not absolve them from their action. Does that mean that social justice advocates can destroy in the name of social justice? How does burning down a federal building or knocking down a statue advance the cause of social justice with mainstream people in society? It doesn't. It doesn't. It only brings out others to their cause who want to be like them and cause disruption. I believe that much of the things going in our cities today is not a push for social justice as much as it is a push for socialism. There are so many people who look around, and because of numerous reasons, they feel left behind. And if they can't get society to provide their wants, then they will all be happy, so that they can all be happy and equal. It doesn't work that way. Even in the socialistic societies, there are those in power. And there are those who receive what the powerful allow them to have. Proverbs speaks often about the value of work and labor in comparison to laziness and slothfulness. When you act as the world owes you, and others should provide all your needs, even when you're not willing to work for them, then that is a destructive course that will lead to ruin. And we see that in the book of Proverbs often, how it talks about laziness and idleness. See, there are many questions about those who are protesting and engaging in civil unrest in our society. Are they working during the day so they can protest at night? Do they actually have jobs, or are they still living with their parents? Are they being paid by outsiders to cause chaos in the middle of an election season? All this is going on in our society. And there are many questions to be answered regarding those who are acting like the Israelites of Samuel's day, because they want to be like everybody else. There are those who want our country to lose its uniqueness as a representative republic, and they want us to be like the other nations. But when we begin to look at the world from a biblical worldview, we begin to see the nature of people as God illustrates that to us as we read the Scriptures. See, the Bible gives us wise counsel on the humanity of people. The same basic principles of how people act and react is the same today as it was in ancient times. I believe that is absolutely true. That's why what God told Samuel regarding the selection of King Saul's replacement is so important. Remember last week when I shared with you one of our texts from 1 Samuel 16:7, when God was having Samuel choose King Saul's replacement, and he looks at David's older brother, and the Lord says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height or his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, looks on the heart." You see, this text was relevant at that time, and it's relevant today. That's why we should view the actions, activities, thoughts, words, and ideals of people rather than their appearance. This past week, I requested some information on some life insurance. From that moment, when I hit send, I've been contacted by 3 life insurance agents. And I realized that I couldn't have just, I was just wanting some information off the internet. But no, you got to talk to somebody. The point that these people wanted was to assess my health and the risk of my premature death in order to determine the risk category I fell in. And they wanted to know that before they could give me the quote. They wanted my height, my weight, whether I used tobacco, current, past medical conditions. All these are some questions that they ask, and they are understandable. However, some of the questions seemed less concerned about my health as they did about how I lived. Had I been convicted of a felony? Did I have a DUI or moving violations? Were questions that would help them assess my behavior and my behavioral death risk versus my dying from an illness. You see, even our actions are being evaluated by businesses rather than appearance, such as height and our weight. Have you been sick? Are you not sick? Are you good health or not? No, they want to know more if they're going to put money on the line betting that you don't die. They want to see how you live. And I think that's reflective of this. Then the question is this: if insurance companies base their premiums on how you act, isn't it our responsibility to view people's actions as a sign of their character as well? Shouldn't we look at the heart of people rather than their appearance? I believe that's the biblical directive that God tells us in 1 Samuel 16. This then brings us to the question of how do we know the heart of someone? See, I believe the Bible helps us understand that as well. To begin with, we need to protect our heart. Now, I'm not speaking about the muscle in that sentence, that muscle that beats in our chest, although we should take care of it as well. I'm speaking about that inner soul of who we are. Who we are. Proverbs 4:20 through 27 speaks about the importance of following biblical counsel, protecting the heart, and living a life of character. My son, give attention to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Do not let them depart from your sight. Keep them in the midst of your heart. For they are life to those who find them and health to all their body. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from your deceitful mouth and put devious speech far from you. Let your eyes look directly ahead, and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. Watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. Do not turn to the right nor to the left. Turn your foot from evil. You see, when we begin to apply biblical teachings not only to our lives on how we are to live, then we will also apply those same standards in our discernment of the actions of others. Some will say, now, we're not to judge others. And that is a true statement if we are judging in determination of one's destiny. But we are to evaluate character of people. Proverbs 13:20 says, he who walks with wise men will be wise. You see, but the comparison of fools will suffer harm. How is one to determine the wise or the foolish if one does not evaluate the character of a person? We can't. Therefore, it is biblical to evaluate people based upon their character and see that the character in their life. Jesus said these words recorded in Luke. For there is no good tree which produces bad fruit, nor on the other hand a bad tree which produces good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they pick grapes from a briar bush. The good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good, and the evil man out of the evil treasures brings forth what is evil, for his mouth speaks from that which fills his heart. As you can see, Jesus tells us how we are to live and demonstrate, and by living that way, it demonstrates who we are. So as we look around us, we evaluate who people are at the time, the character of their lives. And there is a difference of who they are and the value of that person. We have to be very careful in that. We have to understand that their character tells us who they are and what type of person they are. It does not tell us their value. You see, as we apply the biblical worldview, we must understand that the value of every person, as God sees them, then that value is easy to see. Jesus died for everyone, so all people hold a high degree of value to God. And since that's the case, then we must be careful in not allowing our discernment of people's actions to blind us to the fact of reconciliation and redemption as a possibility. People can change their lives. We just heard that this morning, didn't we? There is that potential for reconciliation and redemption even for the murderer by the name of Saul, the Apostle Paul. the persecutor of the church, the denier of the faith, a man by the name of Peter. Reconciliation and redemption is a plan that God has established, and it is possible for all, yet many do not accept it. They don't want reconciliation. Many in this world don't want reconciliation or peace. They want destruction and domination. We are living in the midst of a culture that is called the cancel culture. That's hard for me to say. The cancel culture. The cancel culture refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support or canceling public figures and companies after they have done or said something considered objectionable or offensive. Cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media in the form of group shaming. The cancel culture negates the idea of reconciliation and redemption. See, that's the culture that says, if you've done something that offends us, you are of no value. Well, that's not biblical, because we all have value. The only redemption from the perspective of the cancel culture is the acceptance of their groupthink. If you don't think like I think, away with you. Now I want to illustrate the difference between what I believe discernment and cancel culture is. We're going to call it CC, because that's easier for me to say. Let me show you the difference, in my opinion, because it applies to me. So therefore, it is my opinion. I do not go to Target, nor do I purchase any products from Nike anymore. Those are two businesses that I will not support because of their actions that I believe are either unbiblical, as with Target, and their supporting of the LGBTQ community, or the promoting of division, as I believe Nike does. That's a personal opinion. That's not cancel culture. That's a discernment that I will not spend my money with them. I do not push for them to be driven out of business, nor do I push for the board members to be rejected. I'm rejecting what they promote. Cancel culture, on the other hand, would push for the destruction of these companies and the removal of the board members or the executive leadership teams. There's a difference. Daily, cancel culture is attacking people. This past week, over 11,000 people signed a petition to have Franklin Graham dismissed as president or leadership of the Samaritan's Purse. They wanted him out. Didn't matter what good he's done, he had to go. Had Mr. Graham embezzled money? No. Had Mr. Graham been caught in illicit sexual activity like Jerry Falwell Jr.? No. Had Mr. Graham cast aspersions upon someone? No. Well, what did Mr. Graham do that over 11,000 people, from a Christian perspective, this organization that started this petition to have him removed was a Christian group, so they say. What had he done to support the call for his dismissal? The answer is that he prayed at the Republican National Convention and thanked God for the President of the United States. That is cancel culture. They disagreed with what he did. They wanted him destroyed, removed from his ministry, rather than disagreeing and letting him have his opinion. When things like this happen, I've learned that you look at one's accusers to determine the character of a person. In this case, the group is a group of liberal religious people who, when you look on their website and see what they believe and fight for, you soon realize that their acceptance of sinful lifestyles and their fighting for the Christian community to accept those lifestyles is not biblical. And you realize that Mr. Graham must be doing something right if they are so adamant to have him removed. Someone's enemies can often tell you a lot about a person's character. Now, I suppose that one of the things that frustrates me the most is how that this idea of cancel culture is propagated in the idea of unfairness by those who impose it. Van Jones, who is a Democratic Party promoter who's on CNN, exemplified that as one, and he's one who moves with the movers and shakers of their party, and that's fine. I'm all happy. I believe in the two-party electoral system. But he moves, and he's one of those that believes in the cancel culture. And in a interview the other night, a panel was there, and after the DNC, and someone asked them why they suspended their outrage of the Me Too movement, that idea of women claiming what men had done against them and denial of that, or how they'd been mistreated by men. And the question that came up was, why did they suspend their outrage when asked by why Bill Clinton had not been canceled because of his actions in the past? And it was then that Jones said that they were a party that believed in redemption. And when I listened to that, it came to my mind that my belief is that they only believe in redemption when it is someone on their side who is being questioned. See, if we're going to act some way, we have to be uniform. We can't just live this way, and when we're with this group, live this way. That's what Peter was doing, and Paul called him out for that. We have to be across the board. In my opinion, the cancel culture is a terrible groupthink and mob action because it is based upon perceived values and offenses. Just because someone believes differently than you or me does not mean that they should be eliminated from the conversation. We see that in our schools, our colleges, our college campuses, our political contest, and society in general as we see protests to stop that which people have fought for. I'm amazed that there are those who rally for the protesters in American cities today who believe they have the right to be heard, while those with conservative points of view are to be silenced. If you don't believe that, then you've not been watching social media lately. Which takes me to my next point. We are a people involved in social media. And I believe that a large percentage of social media is used for detrimental purposes. Now, this isn't one of my Facebook rants, okay? Before you cancel me out, hear me out. Social media like Facebook, Twitter, and etc. are tools. They're tools. Just like a hammer, a screwdriver, or a knife. And these tools can be used in positive or negative ways. If I'm building a home and I'm driving nails with the hammer, then that's good. However, if I carry that hammer with me to a riot and break out a window to loot a store or attack someone with it, then that tool is being used in an evil manner. The tool has nothing to do with it. It's the person using the tool. It's the same tool, but the one using it is determining whether it's used for good or evil. When social media is used to attack and cancel people for their beliefs, which might differ from that of someone else, then that is like using a hammer to bust out a window. If I was active on Facebook, there would be those who would want to cancel me because of my beliefs on sinful lifestyles and the actions going on in major cities that so many accept. They might even be petitioning this board to have me removed. Petitioning you to refuse to hear what I have to say. See, there are those who want to do that. And if they did that, that is using the platform which can be used for good and using it for evil. People can disagree. Even people in the body of Christ can have disagreements on opinions. We can disagree on varying opinions and can bring about growth, but varying opinions should not mean that we work to destroy people. I disagree with so much of the socialistic ideas that are being promoted today. The progressive leaders with these socialistic mindsets are some of the people that I disagree with the most. I believe that most of their ideas are harmful and many are unscriptural. However, although I wish they were not in Congress and would go back to their respective districts and do something else, I do not wish that they were destroyed. I despise their political activity and views, but their right to hold them is their right and should not be canceled. Unfortunately, that's not how many feel about about those who disagree with them. But the cancel culture is not something new. I've spoken a lot about it this morning, but it's not something new. It's something that's been around for years, and the Bible talks about it. The Bible shows us the example of it. In Acts 22, we see it in action in the people in Paul's city, in Paul's day. Paul just said that God had sent him to the Gentiles. He was in Jerusalem, and Paul said, God is sending me to the Gentiles. That's my paraphrase. And here's the reaction of the crowd. They listened to him up to that statement that God was sending them to the Gentiles. These were Jewish people. They listened to him to that statement. And then they raised their voices and said, "Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live." Does any of that sound familiar to what you might read on Facebook? So it's not new, is it? Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live. And as they were crying out and throwing off their cloaks and tossing dust into the air, the commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks, stating that he should be examined by scourging so that he might find out the reason why they were shouting against him that way. But when they stretched him out with thongs, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by this question: "Is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is a Roman and uncondemned?" When the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and told him, saying, "What are you about to do? For this man is a Roman." The commander came and said to him, "Tell me, are you a Roman?" And he said, "Yes." The commander answered, "I acquired this citizenship with a large sum of money." And Paul said, "But I was actually born a citizen." Therefore, those who were about to examine him immediately let go of him, and the commander also was afraid when he found out he was a Roman, and because he had put him in chains. Do you see what happened there in that first section? Go back to that. They wanted to kill him because he offered a different opinion than what they believed. They wanted to kill him. He didn't deserve to live. Does that sound like what we hear? It does. It does. They were tossing their cloaks, throwing off their cloaks, tossing dust in the air. That's a sign of frustration and anger. And then they wanted to take him, and their plan was they were going to beat him to find out what was going on. Again, had Paul done anything illegal? No. He held a different opinion than his audience, and they wanted him dead. That was a dangerous type of reaction then, and it's dangerous today as well. As we live in a world where information is instantaneous, we also see what happened here. Go here. They were stretching him out to find out what was going on. They were going to beat him. In our world today, where information is almost instantaneous, we also see actions and reactions based upon only pieces of information and how dangerous that is. This Roman soldier only had a piece of information. The piece was the Jews wanted him killed, and they're going to find out why, and so they stretched out a Roman citizen that had not been convicted of anything and were about to beat him. See, it was prudent and biblical that we evaluate things with as much information as possible. Note that the soldiers were about to beat Paul based upon what little information they had. It wasn't until they found out more information that Paul was a Roman citizen that they stopped. Had he not told them and told them after, there would have been some mighty scared Romans there. See, it was a good thing that they found out before, not after, because Roman citizens had rights, and the fear that came upon the commander just because they'd stretched him out and almost whipped him, it apparently violated those rights, and they were fearful of that. So it's not new, is it? The destruction of people who disagree with you is not new. It's one thing to differ on opinions, even political beliefs, but to come and say, because you believe differently than I do, you should not even be allowed to speak, is wrong. I'm going to share with you something here that is earth-shattering. Listen very closely. Everything that you read on the internet or social media is not always true. Do I need to repeat that? Sometimes it may even have a hint of truth to sell the thought, but that does not make it true. We must evaluate what we read and discern whether that which is stated or repeated is what was honestly said. Example. I read the news on the internet, and I read two differing opinions. I read news from both right and left. Yesterday, I was reading an article on the website that I really like, that I believe is fair and balanced. And I was reading the comments on the article that had been made. And one of the comments made a statement alluding that the CDC was questioning the value of masks in the fight against COVID. And the comment was something like, the CDC is saying that masks are no longer needed, or they're evaluating whether masks are even needed for the fight against COVID. Now, since few, if any, people enjoy wearing masks, I wanted to see if that was true. Because if it was, woo-hoo! I wanted to see if it was true or if it was just misinformation. So how do you find out if something is true or not? You go directly to the source. So I went out to the CDC website and found out that they do still recommend that masks and the value that they offer in mitigating COVID-19. So I go back to my premise Everything that I read on the internet or social media is not always true. This guy was just, whether he's making it up, telling a half-truth, telling something he'd been told, I don't know, but he just made a comment. There is an importance to wearing our mask out in public. There's importance why we want to wear masks here and not hug and not socialize or not embrace one another and shake hands and all that. I hate it as much as you do, but it's here to protect one another. And so that's why we do it. And so I got out there, I said that, and I thought, well, we're going to have to keep wearing masks. You see, there is accurate information, there is misinformation, and it's up to us to discern and seek and search out the truth. Whether it's information on the internet, Facebook, in people's lives, how they act, how they live, and so forth. See, I don't know that our days today are any worse than they have been in the past. There's an article in the Christian Standard, this past Christian Standard, just came out last week. Joanne Frosty handed out last week. And there's a comment in there about Martin Luther and how that he handled the bubonic plague. And it was very interesting on what he said. And how he said that he would not go places that he didn't need to go in order to protect other people. That's my paraphrase of it. But he would go where he needed to go. He dealt with it. Things in the past have been like this. I don't know that our days are any worse than they have been in the past. And when you read and hear about some of the events that happened centuries ago, you begin to realize that although we are going through difficult times, and we are, that things may not be as bad as they were for other people hundreds or thousands of years ago. What I do believe causes some of our concern is the amount of information that is reaching our brain each and every day. We hear so much from around the country, around the world, and then add to that all the social media drama that is out there and people who believe that the world revolves around them. Then you become bogged down with so much negative information, it sometimes seems to be so much that we lose sight of reality. Reality for Christians is that all this will end one day, and that we will be in the presence of God and Jesus Christ, his Son, for eternity. On this earth, there are going to be difficult and tough times. There may even be those who will want to cancel you. There will be those who disagree with you and will break up a friendship. You may even get unfriended on Facebook. But don't lose hope. Keep on pushing ahead in your relationship with Jesus. Never give up. Never doubt that Christ is with you and his peace is with you. And keep these words of Jesus in your mind. These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace. In the world, you have tribulation. But take courage. I've overcome the world.